We still got a few people filtering in.
Will this be available for us to show to our groups?
We are going to have a recording available, and we're also welcome to come give this presentation again to individual groups. So just please let us know.
Uh, our League of Women Voters, Environment League committee would probably like this. So
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm going to get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. As you know, the emergence of artificial intelligence is changing the internet. It's also threatening to change the physical landscape of communities across Kentucky as tech companies seek to build hyperscale data centers here to support the growing demand for AI and cloud computing. So today we'll be discussing what these large-scale data development centers could mean for Kentucky, from increased energy use and water demand to land conservation, rising utility costs, and environmental impacts. We're going to dig into why many counties lack meaningful safeguards and what you can do about data centers that may be coming to Kentucky. But first, I want to do some introductions. I am Ashley Wilms. I am executive director and an attorney with Kentucky Resources Council. We are a statewide public interest environmental law and advocacy organization. And for more than 40 years, we've been a trusted source of free legal representation and advice to individuals, local governments, and even grassroots organizations on environment and energy issues impacting our state. We also promote good energy and environmental policy in Frankfort, and we provide free community workshops like this one to give Kentuckians the tools to better protect the places that they live and love. All of this is to say we are here to help. But we could not do this work alone, which is why we're really grateful to be partnering up and hosting this Zoom today with Kentucky Sierra Club. With that, I give you Jerry James.
Hey, thank you, y'all. My name is Jerry Siva James. I work for the Sierra Club nationally, so I'm the deputy director of our national Sierra Club Outdoors for All campaign, but I'm filling in today for my esteemed colleagues, the Kentucky chapter, and I live here in Frankfort anyways. But the Sierra Club is, the oldest and largest environmental organization in the country. And we've been here, for over 100 years. Started off in the Sierra Nevadas and Yosemite. And our goal is to help like folks across Kentucky fight and also build a people-powered movement for accountability around conservation and environmental protection. So we are here for y'all. This is our Commonwealth. We want to be here to help y'all. We're so excited to be partnering with Kentucky Resources Council again and again for our Commonwealth. So thank y'all. And I want to say this too, like for me, like because I do like a lot of work with the Kentucky chapter, but I work on a lot of national issues. The big thing for us, for myself is like why I wanted to be here is, you know, is our nature, is our water, our rivers. We've been working a lot around Mammoth Cave, around like regional haze, and then there's a delicate karst system there, as y'all know, and it's one of our crown jewels, Mammoth Cave. And so, from my perspective, like we really need to protect our waterways. We need to protect our land. So thank y'all for having me here. Thank you. Yeah, thank y'all. And I'll pass it back to Ashley.
I was on mute. Thanks, Jerry. And I think Jerry brings up, great points about how all of these things are interconnected and how we're grappling with not only new data centers, but other issues throughout our communities. Cave City, in fact, just did a moratorium on a new data center and is considering those issues. And so some of you all might be on from that community, and I'll dig in a little more about that. But yeah, I mean, in the past year, we've really witnessed growing community interest and concern regarding the pace and scale of data centers in Kentucky. Many counties are, some counties, I should say, are excited about potential tax revenue or the creation of new jobs. But at KRC and Kentucky Sierra Club, our inboxes have been filled with messages from citizens and community groups, even county judge executives who have a number of questions and concerns about data centers coming to Kentucky. Can they be built next to my kid's school or residential neighborhood? How noisy are they going to be? Will it increase my energy bill? What about water usage and air pollution from backup generators? And how can my city or county regulate where a data center is located and how it operates? So, what we're going to do today is walk you through some of the basics on data centers and go through a number of the issues and tools that I hope will help both guide local communities and local governments in gathering information from developers and deciding how to potentially site and regulate these facilities, and really whether to allow them at all. We're going to get to some questions at the end, but I know Emily has put something in the chat. It's a link that you can go to and type your questions and even vote on what questions that we will get to. If we don't get to your question today, please email us. That email address will be at the end. So first, what are data centers? Data centers are specialized facilities that provide the physical infrastructure needed to store data and power modern digital services such as artificial intelligence. Smaller data centers can be found in lots of places like hospitals and universities where they're called server rooms. But what we'll be talking about today are these big hyperscale data centers, massive facilities built to store, process, and manage enormous volumes of data. Some of these hyperscale data centers are owned by major tech companies, while others are being developed by third-party companies that will lease or sell their space to businesses that need large-scale data storage and computing power. So what do they look like? On the outside, many of these data centers just look like really big warehouses, but they can sprawl thousands of acres. On the inside, these facilities house thousands of networked computers, storage systems, and networking gear, all supported by massive power, cooling, and security systems, and all designed to ensure around-the-clock operation. Because of recent explosion in generative artificial intelligence and the growing demand for cloud computing and streaming services and other digital services, many areas across the US are seeing an increase in data center development and proposals. And that growth is going to continue. According to a recent report by Consumer Reports, more than 3,000 data centers already operate in the US, with an additional 1,489 planned or under construction. But this is all data centers. But the boom is just getting started. Hundreds more hyperscale facilities may soon be built across the United States. So here you'll see in orange and we're talking about these hyperscale facilities that are more than 500 megawatts. Shown here in dark orange are 68 current hyperscale facilities with another 267 planned that are shown in light orange. We know that Meta alone has dozens of these facilities in various stages of development, including a campus in Louisiana that is 3,650 acres, which is the size of like 2,700 football fields and bigger than the state's airport. So, why are these data centers looking at Kentucky in particular? The South is seeing, this rapid data center explosion, partly due to the affordability and availability of land, tax incentives, and other things. And these issues are at play here in Kentucky. First, although I know many of us are seeing increases in our electricity prices, and it varies across the state, on average, electricity is still relatively cheap in Kentucky. And data centers use massive amounts of power 24/7. We are also recruiting them through tax incentives. In 2024, the Kentucky General Assembly passed a sales and use tax incentives for data center projects in Jefferson County. And that was followed in 2025 by a law extending those incentives to all 120 counties with maximum capital investment requirements that are scaled by county population. We also have available land, and few Kentucky counties currently have restrictions keeping these things out. So, Kentucky is really behind on adopting data center ordinances, which I'll be talking about later. We're also connected to fiber optic routes with big cities. I do want to add, it's important to note, let me see. Oh, here we go. It's important to note that some of the boom we're currently feeling might be a bust. Insiders think that data centers will continue to develop in these clusters, and kind of optimizing their efficiency. So this map from Electric Power Research Institutes, it shows continued projected growth in areas such as Virginia, but maybe less demand that might actually fully materialize in Kentucky. I'm going to kind of come back to this. But for now, data centers are scoping out locations across the state. And so we're seeing these proposals everywhere, but it is important to remember that not all of these projects are going to get built. Um, so, thinking about going back to like local communities, these data centers are coming in and they're promising great jobs. They're promising a lot of local revenue. And so, of course, that's making them attractive to some local governments. In Mason County, local officials say a proposed 2,000 acre data center would include 400 full-time jobs and thousands of construction jobs. Developers of the Campground Road data center project 1,000 construction jobs and 210 permanent jobs. And they say these will have six-figure salaries. But it's important to remember these numbers vary largely, and there's a lot of conflicting data, particularly as to long-term jobs. So communities have to consider whether these jobs, first are worth the trade-offs, but also are they going to be filled locally? Is there the staffing and and really the expertise to locally to fill some of these jobs? A recent study out of University of Michigan also found that once data centers are built, they usually require relatively few employees, since the facilities primarily house computers and servers, and that most of the jobs are lower wage and non-technical positions such as security. Another recent academic study found no clear empirical evidence that data centers stimulate local tech-related employment growth. So a lot of conflicting things, but I think what's really clear is we need more transparency on jobs. We need more commitments on the actual number of permanent jobs that we're going to see from these projects. And that goes with revenue as well in terms of tax revenue. So what are the trade-offs the local communities need to consider, and what tools can help us manage the impacts and the unique challenges of data center development? One of the biggest concerns is energy and water consumption and the strain on local utilities and infrastructure, and whether other customers are going to foot the bill to build new power plants or even new lines for sewer and water. On the utility side, it's primarily the concern of the Public Service Commission, and Byron will be talking about this in a little bit. But there's issues that are also primarily the concern of local regulation, including through planning and zoning. So issues like the noise, both from computer cooling systems and backup generation, localized pollution, the releases of contaminated cooling water to local waterways, and of course, air emissions from backup generators and on-site power generation that we're seeing from some of these facilities. We've got land conversion and siting usage, but also issues of national and global concern. Their reliance on fossil fuels and how this is going to impact greenhouse gas emissions and ultimately our climate. So we're going to start with the biggest impact of data centers, which is energy use. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to KRC's senior attorney, Byron Gary.
Yeah, Ashley, thank you very much for the introduction. And I'm going to switch out, share my screen now. Everybody see community environmental impacts? Same slide? All right. So over the past 3+ years, I've been working at KRC. I have delved deep into the energy world and wanted to start out just level setting really quickly. There are two different important concepts to distinguish. Energy is the total amount used during a period of time. So this would be typically what you see on your residential bill, how much you used over the course of a month. And this is distinguished from the demand or capacity to produce a certain amount of energy. And that's sort of the peak amount used at a given time. So when we talk about kilowatt hours, that's the what you'll see on your bill. And that's distinct from kilowatts, which is the peak amount you use at any given time. Um, so just to get a sense of how big these modern data centers are, um, a single modern data center can use more energy than 100,000 homes, sometimes twice that even. And a report from Grid Strategy says that up to 90 gigawatts of data centers may come online by 2030. These projections vary greatly. As far as what we've seen in Kentucky, the largest proposal that we have gotten wind of is one in Mason County that could be anywhere between 1 and 2.2 gigawatts of peak demand. So just to get a sense of how big these are, they're typically measured in megawatts or gigawatts. They're measured in their energy consumption because that's such a significant part of their profile generally. So what the hell is a gigawatt exactly? With due respect to Marty and Doc, it's pronounced gigawatt. A single gigawatt is roughly what it takes to power all of the homes in Louisville. If every single family home in Louisville turned on basically every appliance on full blast at once, and each house used, about 5 kilowatts at any given time, they would peak out at somewhere around 1.2 gigawatts of energy. Um, so, a modern data center could be roughly the same as every residence in the Louisville area. The one data center that is under development or planned in Louisville is over off Campground Road, which is in West Louisville near the Rubbertown area. That one is currently going through interconnection studies to consume up to 525 megawatts, so roughly half a gigawatt. 1 gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts. And to compare that to some other baselines, the Cane Run Generating Station, which is a large natural gas combined cycle plant over in that same area, a little south of there, produces up to 691 megawatts. So just a little bit more from that single power plant would be consumed by Campground Road data center. Mill Creek Unit 2, which is an aging coal unit that was slated to shut down in 2028, but is now being kept online, also potentially to serve some of this need, only produces 297 megawatts at peak production. So these consume a lot of energy. And those aren't even necessarily the biggest. The Homer City development in Pennsylvania, being built or planned on a former coal site, would consume up to 4.4 gigawatts of energy. That's as much as all of the homes in Philadelphia. So a city that is like 5 times the size of Louisville, 5.7 million, I guess closer to 6 times the size of Louisville, could be consumed by this single data center development that's planned in Pennsylvania. So in aggregate, the amount of energy that these will use is just enormous. Over the course of a given year, they're projected to consume by 2030 as much as 400 terawatt hours. So that's 1,000 gigawatt hours over the course of any given year, or potentially as much as like 10% of the entire grid. These are massive numbers we're talking about. And turning to Kentucky again, specifically, utilities in Kentucky have um, an obligation to serve. They are entitled to collect fair, just, and reasonable rates, and are required to provide adequate service in return. They're granted a monopoly, and in return, they're overseen by the Public Service Commission. And they have to get permission to build power plants, to change rates, et cetera. And their obligation to serve, they claim, means that if a data center is inquiring, they have to be prepared to serve it if it comes, potentially. Uh, because that's kind of a slow process from start to actually getting a new power plant online, data centers are also increasingly looking to uh, build their own generation on site. And we'll talk about both these aspects really quickly here. Before I move on, the Kentucky Public Service Commission oversees all the utilities in Kentucky, including the ones that we'll talk the most about. There are a few exemptions. They don't cover municipal utilities or the TVA utilities in Southwest Kentucky, but most of the utilities in Kentucky are regulated by this body that most people probably have never even heard of. Three people, soon to be five, appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. And returning to those concepts just really quickly that we were talking about, this series of graphs that is a really oversimplified version, but a good way to get a handle on some of the concepts that I mentioned that are important to talk about when talking about how these data centers get served. So the first graph on the left shows at top in gray a capacity limit. This is the amount that we talked about is the peak amount that the utility can produce at any given time. The curve underneath is what we would call the demand at any given time. And then the total area under that, like the total amount consumed over a period of time, is that energy in kilowatt hours or megawatt hours. And some important concepts in how these get served. If in the second picture, we're already consuming that peak amount, which means the system has been, optimally designed. We don't have extra power plants that we're not using at peak. Then a new flexible load could come online without causing us to build new power plants, right? If they just agree to, shave their peaks, as shown in that picture, or alternatively, as shown in picture three, we could shave the peak of existing resources. And then that excess that is freed up could be used by new load potentially. And the last, returning to that first one, if we implement energy efficiency so much that we are able to bring down that entire curve, there's excess capacity there. So these are some of the ways that we could serve data centers without building new power plants potentially, and good explainer sort of the capacity and demand and energy concepts, as well as energy efficiency and demand response. Um, so, what are the concerns with bringing on these data centers if we aren't implementing some of those concepts in particular? One is that there may end up being stranded costs. There's wide variation, as we saw in that graph earlier, on how many data centers will actually be built in the US. And aside from that, there's uh, a lot of uncertainty regarding where exactly they will end up being built. Every data center developer and every Google, Meta, Amazon is calling around to all the different utilities, and every utility that gets a call is not going to end up getting the data center, but they each are planning for it potentially. They each have it in their economic development queue. So there's a real possibility for stranded costs if we build power plants to serve new data centers and then they don't come, or if the bubble goes burst down the line, as we might say. There's also the concerns around even if they do come, the demand for new energy has driven up costs for especially new gas turbines so much that we have seen the cost in the past just 3 years that I've been doing this work nearly double for the same amount of energy from a gas turbine. So there's significant potential for existing ratepayers to end up getting hit on their bills if these come and aren't paying their way. And then even if they are, there are significant concerns around increased air emissions from all the new power plants that are being built primarily to serve this economic development load, largely in the form of data centers. Greenhouse gases, criteria, air pollutants, meaning the smog and soot, and then gas plants also put out a significant amount of air toxics like formaldehyde, and keeping coal plants online longer to potentially serve these is creating a whole other suite of pollution issues and concerns. Um, and just to show how these are being fueled primarily, this study from Latitude Intelligence shows that hyperscalers are primarily being powered by natural gas. This is the number of gigawatts of gas for Meta, Microsoft, Google, Oracle, Amazon. Google has a significant amount of sorry, my phone is now reacting to me. It thinks I'm talking to it because I said Google. Um, Google is potentially building a significant amount of clean energy, but by and large, the others are being powered by gas. So how do we know if a new data center is going to impact our rates? There are a number of different factors. These here are from a recent Brattle study. Brattle is a consulting group nationally known. But what it comes down to basically is, are the incremental costs, the new costs being incurred to serve them, going to be greater than or less than the incremental revenue, the amount that the new load will be paying to be served? If the costs are greater than the revenues, the extra costs get passed on to all of us. If the revenues are bigger, then it potentially even benefits all ratepayers. So how do we ensure that that equation results in the revenues being greater than the costs? There are a number of different ways. Regional transmission organizations such as PJM help ensure that the entire grid, it's economies of scale, basically. That if a data center is built in, say, Eastern Kentucky, it doesn't necessarily mean that a new power plant has to be built there. They can purchase energy from the larger grid. Uh, um, these new data centers could be required to bring their own generation, build their own power plants and transmission, or pay for them to be built directly, and then get served by them. They can locate near existing resources. So where there is already excess capacity that is unused, especially where there are large amounts of renewable energy on the grid that are requiring us to build new transmission to get from, where the wind and sun are to where the consumption is. If they locate near those, that's that much less that needs to be shuffled across the grid and can potentially even free up transmission resources. It's important to design the rates or tariffs for these facilities right. When I say tariff, I don't mean the things that we are paying for Chinese goods now. Tariff is the sort of rate schedule for all of the different classes of customers. So making sure that there's a good data center tariff in place. And then going back to the curves and the capacity limit that I showed earlier, if the data centers agree to be interruptible or to have demand response to turn down their power when the peaks are hit, that can mean that we don't have to build as much new generation and can end up protecting us all. It's also important to pace how quickly these things are coming online so that they're not outpacing generation and how we transmit power from here to there. Um, right now, they are coming online or projecting to come online a lot quicker than we can serve them, which means that rates could end up going up for all of us potentially. And then lastly, it's important to get load forecasting right. Knowing with some confidence where, when, and how large these data centers will be built is really important so that we're not building for data centers that either end up not showing up or getting built elsewhere, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of different ways. That's a hard thing to do, but there are sort of factors that can be considered to make sure that what we're projecting as far as the load is accurate. On the right here are a number of different recent studies um, from Harvard, Duke, Brattle, as I mentioned, and the Center for Public Enterprise that discuss some of these concepts. Just really quickly on the Duke Nicholas Institute study on the bottom left there, I wanted to mention really quickly that that study found that uh, I'm forgetting the exact numbers, but I feel like if they turned down, if data centers agreed to be interruptible or have flexible load 1% of the time. So 1% of all the hours of the year, we could bring them all of those 75 or so gigawatts currently projected online without having to build any new power plants. So that's a really important factor in how these are served. And then I'm not going to go through each one of these, but we've seen 3 data center tariffs approved in Kentucky so far, one from Kentucky Power Company, one from LG&E and KU. They're 2 separate companies, but they operate together and have the exact same tariff for data centers, except as to the exact rates. And then East Kentucky Power Co-op. And these are some of the sort of things that have been proposed across those different studies from the last slide that might help protect ratepayers. And you can see how many of those are unknowns at this point, or how many don't seem to be included or contemplated in the tariffs that we've seen approved. In particular, that flexible load requirement or incentive is a big missing one. As far as the question marks, the adequate demand and energy charges are question marks there because we know how much they're going to be charged, but as far as I'm aware, we have not seen any of the utilities actually put forward a incremental or marginal cost analysis that shows compared to how much they're being charged, how much the cost is going to be to serve them. So we really don't know yet whether they are being charged adequately. So that's a big question mark for the future as well. And then, of course, there's the health and energy consumption impacts, health and environment, as Jerry was talking about earlier. All this new generation is going to have significant potential impacts in the form of greenhouse gases and those other pollutants that I mentioned. But some areas are finding solutions. So aside from bring your own generation, one of my favorite acronyms these days is bring your own new clean energy, or Beyonce. Some utilities are requiring these data centers to find their own renewable resources to bring onto the grid to serve themselves. They can, as I mentioned, locate near existing renewable resources. There are times when the wind turbines in the Midwest are producing more energy than can currently be used. If data centers were able to take advantage of excess capacity that already exists on the grid, that would be a big savings for all of us. The tariff design, as I just went over, is really important, making sure that as many of those factors are in place, and in particular, that flexibility of the load and ensuring that the incremental revenues are greater than the incremental costs is really important. Interruptibility, as I mentioned, also a part of that tariff design. And then the pacing that interconnection, making sure that we don't overbuild fossil generation for data centers that don't end up showing up. Um, I just wanted to mention also as to how we end up serving these data centers, uh, whatever number of them do come online. Several bills in recent years have emphasized fossil fuel energy and prioritized it over renewable resources in Kentucky. SB 4 in 2023 and SB 349 in 2024 basically made it impossible to replace fossil fuels that are aging and coming off the grid with new renewable energy. Instead, one has to be replaced with like kind. Fossil fuels can only be replaced essentially with other fossil fuels under those laws. And the assumption underlying that was that that sort of production is more reliable and keeps our rates down. We had questions about those assumptions, so we commissioned a report from Current Energy Group and Resilient Transition to actually do some modeling to find out what is the actual most affordable way we could serve projected energy demands. What Current Energy Group found was that by and large, rather than building any new gas, actually, we can keep some of what's online for a little while and slowly build out renewable resources on top of that, along with battery backup storage. And importantly, those demand side measures, that load flexibility, and end up saving somewhere in the neighborhood of $2.5 billion by 2050 if we did it, as compared to current utility planning that primarily relies on coal and gas to meet our energy needs. Um, so that sort of emphasizes how that protecting ratepayers and protecting our health and environment actually go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And just one of many figures from that study shows the potential emissions that would be avoided by taking a lower cost option as well. That black line at the top is the greenhouse gas emissions under current planning scenarios from utilities. All three of the other options, from going fully renewable, which could be roughly about the same price as what utilities are planning right now, or going least cost with economic renewables, or even adding those demand side measures, we save so much greenhouse gas emissions. Just one figure recently, LG&E is planning construction of a new gas plant in Southwest Louisville, Mill Creek 6, primarily justified by this new large load demand that they're projecting. That one facility and its recent proposed air permit would result in an extra 1 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year. So just one of these gas plants that is being constructed, 1 million tons of greenhouse gases per year. So it's a big deal for a lot of different reasons. Transitioning just a little bit and moving quickly through a few other concerns. The data centers cause directly themselves. They cause localized pollution. We hear a lot of concerns around water use, noise, land conversion from areas that are primarily rural, especially, and then the fossil fuel use directly on site. I'm going to touch on each of those really quickly in turn. So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these, because of the sort of delays in bringing new utility generation online, are planning to build their own gas turbines on site. So, building their own power plants directly with them. This has already been seen in Memphis with Elon Musk's company XAI. Even if they're not building their own generation on site, they have such a demand for uninterrupted power. These unanticipated outages in particular can cost them lots of money. So they build their own backup on site. And a lot of them are building diesel backup generators, essentially, oversized truck engines as shown in the picture there, and hundreds of them. One 500 megawatt data center could use as much energy as would be produced by, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 semi trucks. There are other options, building renewables, as we mentioned, and batteries as backup on site could serve much better with much less pollution potentially. And those sort of projects are also expandable in ways that benefit the community directly. Specifically talking about backup generators, one single 500 megawatt data center, as I mentioned, could use potentially hundreds of these 2 to 4 megawatt generators on site. These are loud, they are polluting, and there are a lot of other concerns around them. One second, sorry, finding my place here. All right. So number two, the water usage. A single data center can use millions of gallons of water per day. And all that water that is taken in often gets discharged right back into the sewage system, which has significant strain in dealing with that amount of wastewater. This water is used for cooling the servers that get really hot in these large warehouses full of them. Some new data centers are using what's called a closed loop system. This uses less water but potentially more energy, and it doesn't fully fix the problem. They still have evaporative losses, and they still need to take in water. They also need to purge that system occasionally, which can still lead to discharges of potentially polluted wastewater, depending on what sort of system is being used. We don't know exactly how much is going to be used by all of these. A lot of the planning around data centers, as I think Ashley might touch on in a little bit, is highly secretive, and we're not really sure. The Campground Road one had asked for more potential discharge into the Metropolitan Sewer District than they had available. So it's a very real problem. All of these different systems also create lots of noise. So the servers, the cooling, the generation, whether it's backup or not, all of these are extremely loud. The decibel scale shown on the right is actually what you'd call a exponential scale. So 100 decibels is not twice as loud as 50 decibels, which is roughly like conversation level. It's 1,000 times more. So it's a big problem for neighbors to these data centers. Local governments do have the ability to do something about that in their ordinances and regulations, and Ashley will talk a little bit about solutions to some of these local issues specifically. And then lastly, data centers create a lot of heat, whether from the generation itself or the servers or the cooling systems. Those create a lot of waste heat potentially. And when they're constructed, whether it's in a rural area or an urban area, they can create these mini heat islands that become very problematic for neighbors. They can exacerbate existing problems or potentially make it less livable or farmable in the areas around. There are proposals out there for how to capture this waste heat to use to create some of the energy needed by data centers or by surrounding homes and businesses and whatnot. I am unaware of any of these actually being implemented yet, but it's an interesting cutting edge that we'll be keeping an eye on. And I think with there, I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley to take us through some of the local planning that can solve some of these issues.
Well, thank you for that, Byron. Can you everybody see my full screen again?
Not yet.
Oh. Are we seeing? We're just seeing me. Okay. Let me try this one more time. Uh, how about that?
Yep.
Good? Okay, great. So, I think the next question is, and why many of you are here is, how can communities address these issues and other impacts? There is no state or federal framework that specifically addresses the regulation or siting of data centers here in Kentucky. Instead, these facilities are regulated, if at all, under a patchwork of local ordinances and general state laws and regulations that mostly predate the hyperscale data boom. I want to note, of course, there are state and federal permitting requirements that will apply to the construction and operation of these facilities, particularly like those that have, as Byron was talking about, that are trying to build their own natural gas plants. But that is we probably will do a whole separate Zoom on these issues that you see. But today I really want to take a step back to the community level and the local siting and regulation of these facilities. So, we've been, what I think the number one question is your community prepared? Is your county prepared? The first place to look is to determine if your city or county has adopted planning and zoning. And if so, whether those zoning regulations address data centers. If not, please reach out to your planning commission and your city council or your county judge executive to get involved. Most local ordinances and zoning codes never envisioned this type of new facility that is energy and water hungry, but also part warehouse, part office complex, part high-tech stronghold, and part energy production facility. So many communities are now grappling with where or if data centers will be allowed, and unfortunately, some have found that it's too late. We've actually seen a few projects that are moving forward, without needing rezoning or even a conditional use permit, which leaves the community without much opportunity to require things like setbacks or noise restrictions or, provisions to address those potential diesel generators. So in Jefferson County, the Campground Road facility was able to move forward without requiring rezoning, having been already classified under existing industrial zoning as a telecommunication hotel. This classification has, of course, caused some significant public backlash, but it has prompted city efforts to tighten those regulations. And I know some of you on the call have been involved with that. In Simpson County, a new $5 billion multi-building data center project is now moving forward as a permitted use after the developer argued it should be classified as a service establishment, And unfortunately, the county attorney agreed. This classification was intended for hair salons and not hyperscale data centers. But unfortunately, that's what's being allowed. So no conditional use permit is being required, even for the natural gas facility that is being built on site, because they are saying that's an auxiliary use. A local community group, Franklin Citizens for Responsible Development, has sued over that determination, and Kentucky Resources Council just filed an entry of an appearance in that case to represent them, along with the law firm Strobo Barkley. So you can stay tuned for that. But community opposition is working. Last summer, another large data center was proposed for rural farmland in Oldham County, but it actually ended up backing out after opposition. And we know that Cave City entered into a 12-month moratorium blocking all new data centers. So. But many communities are considering where or if data centers will be allowed. And so this is where I think our model ordinance comes in. So to assist local governments with this, Kentucky Resources Council has developed two model data center ordinances, one for counties that have adopted planning and zoning, and the other for counties that have not. Since only 40 of Kentucky's 120 counties have both planning and zoning, we've also developed a siting ordinance for those counties without planning and zoning. And I think Tom Fitzgerald is on the call today, and I want to thank him for all of his work developing these two model ordinances for us. These ordinances are based upon a review of best practices from across the state, and they're intended to help communities adopt local ordinances to regulate the unique issues involving siting, construction, and operation of these data centers. The other thing to note, though, is your city or county may consider a temporary moratorium on new data center projects until an ordinance governing or prohibiting data centers is adopted. This model ordinance is on our website now, and the siting ordinance for counties without planning and zoning will be available there tomorrow. I'm not going to go through both ordinances, but I want to highlight some key provisions, particularly of our model zoning ordinance and some of the issues that I think should be addressed. So the KRC data center model ordinance requires a conditional use permit, in addition to limiting the location of data centers to a new industrial zone that was a special industrial zone for data centers. We believe that the flexibility of a conditional use permit allows crafting of case-specific conditions as necessary to integrate the proposed data center into the environment and community, but while protecting neighborhood landowners and others. The conditional use permit, I do want to note the conditional use permit in the model ordinance would be issued by the Planning Commission in conjunction with rezoning. And again, that would be with a new industrial classification. So in Jefferson County, for those of you that are working there, the ordinance may use binding elements rather than a conditional use permit, which I know is being considered there. The model ordinance includes standards and planning requirements to assure conditions, consideration of, and avoidance, mitigation, and minimization of impacts to neighborhoods, residential properties, our land, air, and water resources. prime agricultural lands, and also, our natural environment, forests, endangered species, karst areas. Um, Going back to the issue I discussed earlier, it requires a utility and infrastructure plan, including information on all water, wastewater, electric, gas, and other public utility services. It requires documentation from the utility provider that that project can be safely accommodated without adverse impacts on the local community or local infrastructure and water resources. It also includes standards on backup generators and cooling systems to limit those offsite impacts. Other provisions of the model ordinance, and again, this is online, and so you can go online and read the whole model ordinance and hopefully present it to your planning commission. But it includes design standards to minimize offsite visual impacts, restricts lighting to control glare and minimize those offsite impacts. Other things like screening and landscaping. So thinking about those visual impacts, things like setbacks. Are you going to see these things from the road? It includes siting criteria. So again, thinking about the local landscape of, is there karst or wetlands, prime farmland, making sure that if they're built, they're avoiding steep slopes and flooding impacts. It again also includes setbacks and allows reduction. It does allow reduction of setbacks with adjacent owner consent as long as there's appropriate buffering. In terms of addressing the noise level, it sets maximum limits for all sound frequencies, but also requires a noise assessment and an acoustical study. So, a lot of this is geared to the community getting information. So how loud is this going to be? Because what we want is to avoid these off-site nuisance conditions, from noise. Because we've obviously I think all heard horror stories about some of these things operating all day and night. And so making sure that the community is not impacted. Addressing other impacts, things like consideration of the offsite impacts of waste heat, which Byron discussed, encouraging low impact development practices, consideration on the impact of property values and nearby land uses, because unfortunately these things can, impact local property values, and even a traffic study. So the last piece is making sure that there's public notice and hearing, having a decommissioning plan and performance bond, and then sort of setting these standards about how for the issuance of the conditional use permit. There's also a provision just where the planning commission would have some control to impose other conditions deemed necessary or appropriate to protect public health, safety, and welfare. So there's, the KRC model data this is for home rule counties. This ordinance differs somewhat since there's no authority for a county to engage in land use planning without complying with the provisions of KRS Chapter 100. So without having planning and zoning, the ordinance can't limit the location of data centers to a category of land use. Since there's no planning commission or board of adjustment, the ordinance requires a construction and operation permit that would be issued by the fiscal court. It allows, also though, things like imposition of a fee that is sufficient to allow the fiscal court to secure an independent review of the application, and also includes many of the other provisions like the standards and planning requirements that, assure the consideration of, minimization of impacts. So this model siting ordinance will be available on our website tomorrow. So we're almost done with that one. But getting ready to get to that. But I think that the key here is that smart planning and enforceable standards really provides an opportunity for community concerns to be addressed, and can ensure that if these things do come to your community, that growth doesn't come at the expense of Kentucky's families, our waterways, or future generations. So we hope that all Kentucky counties will address this issue and develop an ordinance that that addresses these. So I do want to note that we obviously need new laws at the state level to address data center concerns. KRC drafted a bill that would assure a baseline review of all data center proposals over a certain threshold. And this is by amending existing law regulating merchant power plants and transmission lines to include a requirement that data centers obtain a construction certificate from the Kentucky State Board on Electric Generation and Transmission Siting. That did not get off the ground this legislative session, but we'll be pushing for it in 2027. And a copy of this is also available on our website, on the data center website that we posted. So we also saw a bill this past session prohibiting local officials from signing non-disclosure agreements with data center development, which unfortunately didn't pass, but definitely highlights this important issue of transparency because, we've even seen in communities where they've said things like their water use or how many jobs they're going to create is a trade secret. But unfortunately also where they're coming in and having local officials sign these non-disclosure agreements. And it's really, the community unfortunately doesn't find out about these things until it's too late. But so what else should communities know and what tools are available? I want to just let you know we are launching a new handbook in conjunction with the Kentucky Sierra Club. So this is really, it's going to cover a lot of the things that we had today, but have links to lots of other resources and things that you can use in your community. And we will be launching that very soon in the next week. And that will also be available both on our website, which is at kyrc.org/data centers, and on Kentucky Sierra Club's website. And all of you will receive a copy of that by email with some of these links. So I also want to note two upcoming data center discussions. Kentucky Waterways is hosting a conversation with Byron Gary from KRC and Hank Grady, who I also think is on one of these calls and represents We Are Mercer County. And the Christina Lee Brown Enviro Institute is doing a series on data centers. And I think actually Byron is speaking on that one as well. So with that, I know we're right at 1 o'clock. I do want to make some time for questions. I know some of you may need to jump off, but for those of you that can stick around for a few minutes, we can go through a couple of the questions. If we don't get to your question, please feel free to email us. You can email us at hello@kyrc.org. Emily, if you'll drop that in the chat. So like I said, if we don't get to your question, please email us. And we're also available to come talk to your local group or provide more information or even help guide your county as to development of one of these ordinances. So Byron, am I forgetting anything before we jump into a few questions?
No, I don't think so. I was going to turn there. I've got the
Great.
link open here. There's one that has gotten the most thumbs up, so we'll start at the top there. The question is one group working on bringing together the multiple groups working on data center issues? There seems to be disconnection and lack of awareness between groups. So I'll start by saying that's a fabulous question. On the energy side, intervening before the Public Service Commission, I represent a coalition of groups commonly called the Joint Interveners that includes Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, Metropolitan Housing Coalition, Appalachian Citizens Law Center, Mountain Association, and Kentucky Solar Energy Society. So we are coordinating among those groups before the PSC, and Sierra Club often intervenes independently, but we, depending on the case, are able to communicate between Sierra Club and Kentucky Resources Council and the Joint Interveners as well. Aside from that, there are a few others that are trying to do that sort of work. Hank Grady, who Ashley just mentioned and is on the call. I saw him earlier. I don't know if he's still around, but he has been doing fabulous work representing a number of the different groups that are popping up in different counties as they hear about these. And including in Mason County. And then Kentuckians for the Commonwealth also has started up a coordination and I think monthly call. If you check out KFTC's page, you should be able to find info on those monthly calls. Other than that, it sort of depends on the region. I know here in Louisville, the Louisville Urban League has been working on coordination between a number of different groups. And then I saw somebody in the chat from Node Data Centers 502. I think folks have been in touch. I don't think there's one, Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, one like overarching coalition to rule them all or anything.
No, and I do hope that our website we're going to have some resources and that may be something that we send out. I know other groups even like I think Lane is on from Kentucky Conservation Committee and I know she's been tracking some data center proposals and we have in Kentucky Sierra Club and so I love seeing you all in the chat like say where you're from and why you're here and so I think there's a lot of opportunities and basically I think we could be doing better about some coordination. So that was a great question. Um, Byron, is there another one you want to jumpstart
Sure.
to?
I think the second one about building them in the least harmful way was covered by a lot of these. I don't know if there's anything you want to highlight about building them in the least harmful way, Ashley.
Well, I mean, I do think that's where our model ordinance can be helpful, and it is meant as a it's not going to be it's not it it's almost like a choose your own, right? So every community has a different need, and so what we really are doing, I think, with these ordinances is putting in what we think are best practices. But communities should be looking at the various issues and their local concerns and using this as an opportunity to address things like noise. There are also some sample community benefit agreements. We're going to be posting some of those on our website. So, just hopefully, I think the more that the community can be involved and the earlier, the better. And so we hope to see that model moving forward versus what we're seeing now, which is, really, I think a lot of communities being blindsided by these things.
Yeah, transparency seems to be a common theme that would help in a lot of the other areas. I don't know how long you want to go. There are so many great questions in here. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but I really appreciate them. And as Ashley mentioned, we're still finalizing that handbook, so maybe we'll be able to answer some of these that we don't get to in there too, as we put finishing touches in. The next one, though, was about BYOP, bring your own power, also commonly known as BYOG, your own generation, is one way to protect ratepayers' electric bills. What are the downstream effects of having privately owned and operated power plants attached to data centers? So there are a few. Obviously, discuss the localized pollution impacts of having a power plant in general. It doesn't matter what it's powering, it's going to be putting out a lot of pollution in various forms. As to the grid, it sort of depends on a number of different factors. So some data centers in other states have been buying up generation that was slated either to retire or have some other purpose and sort of taking it off the grid or minimally connected to the grid. And that can have problems around grid planning sort of writ large. There's a lot of planning that goes into location and making sure that everything on the grid is balanced at every instance of every day. And taking a power plant offline can potentially have huge impacts on that.
And there's a couple of questions about, can these data centers just be powered by solar panels that could be on their roof or on site? And Byron, maybe you can add to this. I mean, the problem is it depends on how big it is, right? Some of these that are 500 megawatts, I mean, that's a huge solar farm. And so, I certainly we're hoping to see more renewables on site being part of the solution, battery storage. But Byron, what are your other thoughts on that? But it's not just solar
Yeah.
panels on roofs, unfortunately.
Yeah, probably not just on the roofs of the data centers. 1 megawatt takes around 5 to 7 acres of solar to generate. So that would take a lot of acreage. Potentially, if they're building a large campus of these all together or something like that, it could add up if they started placing it around that area. The problem is also the need for power round the clock. So they would need to pair that with batteries more than likely, which we would encourage as a form of backup power at these sites, or if they are pairing with renewables as the primary way to balance that out. But we've also heard word about community benefits agreements that do provide, say, rooftop solar and batteries to neighbors as a way to offset potential impacts on their bills. So even if it's not enough to power the data center itself, those sort of community benefits can help reduce the bills of folks near data centers. So there are innovative ideas around that. And also that lowering that curve, that peak of the curve is sort of the most important. So, um, yeah,
With I know there's so many good questions here, and I'm not going to keep people too long, but yeah, this, I see this a few times too, which is, addressing the core problem of, um, our energy use, our AI use. I mean, in terms of the highest demand, like this generative AI is what is really bringing the bigger piece of the boom, right? But just like anything else that I think a lot of us grapple with, our own, what the energy that we're using, and that also goes with the, the AI resources that we're using. But the in terms of these a lot of these big centers, the bulk of this is this generative AI, this advanced language model AI, things that are like, I just read like Meta is replacing something like 7,000 of their workers with some of these systems. So it's that higher level, usage. But that said, I mean, as we all try to remember to turn off the lights when we leave the room, and I do think that that piece of like, educating kids and making those connections of, the fact of our, personal decisions impacting as well. So, Byron, anything else on that?
no, gosh, there are just so many great questions too. I
Oh,
don't know which to tackle next. I think
think
that was
you've
a
got
good
like
overarching one.
time for like one more, or
Sure, I've got all day. Um,
Deborah notes that we're using, yeah, Slido, which is powered by AI, while we have this discussion. I mean, right? It's
yeah,
good points. It is, AI is. I mean, if you are talking into Siri on your telephone, you're using AI, and
yeah,
so, it's these are the issues that right we're all having to grapple with.
But I want to jump in and say, Ashley, like you said,
yeah,
it's the generative AI that is really the issue. So like, I said in the chat, data centers have been around for like a long, long time. And it, like that usage is very normal. It's very normal. But when you add and quantum computing, at high speed for everybody at the tip of your fingertips, and then you have the defense industry, and commercial industries using it. That is where the energy consumption is. And so I just want to make sure that folks, we're not shamed. We like because we tend to do this in the environmental community, point fingers, but it's really these corporations that we need to be like pointing the fingers at. So I just wanted to
yeah.
say that there are corporations in these major industries. That is where the vast majority of this consumption is coming from.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Jerry. I use AI to fight AI sometimes even. So, yeah, that's a great point.
And I think it's probably a great place to wrap up today. I mean, Jerry, thank you for sharing that important last, that last piece, because yeah, we do, as we're grappling with these things, we as communities need to come together, and think about these solutions, and it's the reality is it's part of our lives moving forward. So. Thank you so much to Kentucky Sierra Club for hosting this event with us today, and for Byron and Fitz and all of those of you that helped make this presentation. So with that, I'll let you all get back to your days. But again, please reach out to us. Please reach out to Jerry or Kentucky Sierra Club if you have any other questions, and we'll be excited to share more resources with you soon.
Thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
everybody. Bye. Byron, if you can shut it for everybody, I'm not able to do that.
Yeah, yeah. That's end for everybody. Oh, and save the recording first.
Okay. Oh, thank you.